Yes, you're still watching Good Morning Kenya there with that report with what is happening on our major roads. Remember that 85% of, persons living within Nairobi and its environs find their way within the CBD. And that's why we have Traffic Marshal A1 just keeping us updated on what is happening on our major roads this morning. Now we shift gears from what is happening on the roads and as well as what is happening in our schools in regard to who is to blame and what role parents can play to ensure that, what we have, moral decadence in our schools actually is stopped to some extent. So, mtoto mleavyo ndivyo akwavyo. Thank you very much for keeping us company. Those who are on Twitter as well as Facebook, we continue with this conversation. And now we're going to be talking about the state, your mental state, in as far as is it healthy or not? Now, a report that was made public beginning of this year indicates that 61% of Kenyans are lonely. 52 of them, I'm part of those statistics, 52% feel helpless, while 33% of Kenyans feel angry. We're talking about the issue of mental status, and to take us through this conversation is none other than Stella Waruinge, who is a health psychologist as well as the head of mental health and substance abuse at the NMS. Karibu sana.
Thank you so
much. The statistics there, more to actually just put the figures into more perspective, is that 4 out of every 10 has a mental issue we are dealing with. How about we start from what are the triggers before we look at the numbers? They're very overwhelming. When you say that 33 of us in this country, 33% of our population feel angry, that's a lot of anger going around. But what are the triggers, Daktari?
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me. And when you look at those numbers, it's a bit saddening because those are the numbers or the statistics that we have been having from WHO for a very long time. So I believe if we had a very robust kind of data collection on mental health, the numbers would be much higher, especially because our country, we don't have very segregated mental health data. You asked about what are the triggers. I don't want to say COVID has been a trigger because, that is all what we're talking about. But even before COVID, we had a society that was still going on with all its challenges. So maybe just to put them in 2 categories. Number one, we have the genetic, where, you have a family history of mental illness. There's nothing much you can do about it. If you ask people if you've ever visited a health facility, have you ever asked if you have a family history of diabetes?
Yes.
Family history of hypertension?
Yes.
Why do they ask? We are looking forward where you're going to be asked, do you have a family history of mental illness? I don't know what people are going, because a lot of stigma and discrimination is associated with mental health. So there's that genetic where you're more predisposed because it's in the family lineage. And with this, we ask, if you have a family history of diabetes, hypertension, what are you told? You're told on how to buffer yourself, how to stay healthy, how to exercise, how to eat healthy. The same thing. So that is one triggers, that is the family history. The other one is the environmental. And this is where we can be able to reduce or work on. For example, poverty. Poverty comes with its own baggage. It's a whole family, because when you're poor, most likely where you're living, you more likely live in formal settlements where there's issues of water and sanitation. There's a high rate of crime, high rate of violence, either at the family value. Poor nutrition. So as they were discussing about schools, we need to ask ourselves, what is, we need to profile these children. What kind of the pregnancy, when the mothers were having them, issues of nutrition, when they were childhood age, do they have the right nutrition? And the other one, you find that also in the environment, we're having issues of childhood traumas. When you look at childhood traumas, you're talking about issues of rape or defilement. You're talking about abuse. We have seen cases where children are really abused, both physically and also emotionally and psychologically, because where they are living. So, and then also loss of a loved one, grief and loss. Children or even adults, when you lose a loved one and you're not allowed or you don't go through the whole process of grief and loss, those are what we call advanced life events that would trigger you to going into mental illness. You have seen cases where a child loses a parent and they don't recover. And what we see is I feel sad when I see we are only seeing the delinquency in this child, but we're not asking ourselves, like now they have discussed about banning of school. We're not asking ourselves what is behind that. So those are some of the triggers, and as an individual level, you're not able to deal with your emotions. You're not able to deal with the life. You know, you've seen in traffic where someone is is blocked by a matatu, they pull a gun and they shoot.
Yes.
Is that normal? So those are some of the triggers of mental health in the among us. Yeah.
So environment that encompasses issues of emotions, poverty and such. And I think this is where we need to zero in on, because genetics, there's nothing you can do about the genetics.
Yeah.
Now, talking about the emotions, the emotional state of being. You see, people take for granted being happy.
Yes.
Yes, being happy. So from your point of view and from your experience as an individual, someone who's probably watching this program, what would you tell them to look out for? Because when you talk about poverty, let's just look at the rate of inflation as a country right now. And also let's look at the issues of COVID and COVID-19 disruptions. We are dealing with so much. So what would be and what would an individual be looking out for? You know, as you've said, people are really losing it on traffic. We had over the weekend the case of that matatu who was quite, you know, abusive and aggressive, and now he's incarcerated as we speak. So what should we look out for?
When you look at it's about we having these we're trying to drive the aspect of self-care because you know yourself, and of late when you look at issues of mental health, just to make it simple, we look at 3 areas: your cognition, that is the thoughts, your behavior and your emotions. It forms like a triangle. So when one is tipped, one is lost, the triangle will tip off. So when you look at the thoughts, what are the thoughts that I've been having lately as an individual? Have I been having thoughts of despair? So low self-esteem, and anything happens, you blame it on yourself. There's a problem at work, you take the blame. If you have a confrontation with someone, you think on the extreme, uyo nitamua, you know, or I'm going to, and when you look at what I always challenge people, watch news and tell me a day you're not going to watch issues of grievous harm in terms of in the relationship, in terms of even a mother who just kills the son because he has taken 20 shillings that was meant for, you know, we go to the extreme.
Actually, we have a story that we wanted to highlight this morning, is that a mother ended up beheading their son, and I can't fathom what went through their head.
That is purely, you see, that is what mental health is, and that's a whole discussion we need to sit here and talk about maternal mental health, because purely from what happened, that is purely what we call postpartum depression or psychosis, because it is not normal. I mean, we drop that because that's a whole discussion to just let our, because even when I was reading it, I was seeing people would say she had issues before. She was not normal. You know, people say kichwa, hakwa kichwa, kuna kitu ilikuwa. But you see, what as a society, you're pregnant, you're expected to be happy. You get a child, you're expected to be happy, you're expected to breastfeed. But they don't know, because with depression, you're tearing apart. And the worst thing with mental health, I say, we can't run a rapid test. Not like HIV, we're going to run a test and see it's positive or negative, or blood sugar, or what happens is on the inside. And as human being, if I have an issue, and I feel I'm not okay, even if I'm going through a very, you know, separation or something, or as an individual, human beings, we know how to mask. And I'm supposed to turn up at work. I will turn up and I will have a meeting and I will behave normally. But deep down, apart from a few things that can give you away when there's a different opinion, you want to obstruct it and you want to, you know, in a different way, most of us are living, you're walking on the edge. But because you cannot misbehave at work, because because you have a title, because you've not gotten to a breakthrough, and when it happens, we only see the worst. So when you ask what can we do, we need to do self-care. We need to know that taking care of myself. I challenge people and ask, you have 24 hours. How many hours do you spend on yourself in a day? That is yourself, either meditating, either getting to a physical activity, because you know when you're doing a physical exercise like you're jogging, or it's about you, most of the time you find everything comes back to you, and you get a time to, you know, rethink, to rebuild yourself and build your mental resilience. It's about the diet that we choose. With all due respect to the fast food that has come up very, you know, at the doorstep you get delivery, and what is being delivered is junk.
Oh yes.
So to the youth, I'm not a prophet of doom, but I can tell you, it doesn't just affect you physical, but it affects you mental, you know, because you're single, you're working, you live in a bedsitter, and you get home, it's about 8, you call a delivery, and you get junk. So that one really affects your mental wellness. Is the ability to stay connected. Are you connected? even with Corona that came, that made people to be disconnected.
Oh, when you say connected, you know, our form of connected in the 21st century is where we are always connected because we have our mobile gadgets. But I think you're talking about, you're more going to the interpersonal.
Yes.
Do you have that connection? Do you have those people who stand by you, who can listen? Is that what you're referring to?
Because you find that as human beings, we always have, if something happens, most of us will call our mothers. We do have that kind of what we call social support network, be it in the family, and I say it has to start from the family level. Then at the, you know, if you're Christian, at the society level, maybe at the church, do you have that jumuiya? Do you have at work? What kind of culture is there at the work? Or you all report to work and go? Then lastly, how you can be able to take is the spirituality. Whether, and for us, we talk about your higher being because we talk to the Muslim, we talk to the Hindu, we talk to the atheist. Everyone has their super being they believe in. Who is that you believe in? Is it your God? Is it your Allah? Is it your... What is the connected? Do you take time to meditate? People who do yoga really do well. So those are some of the little things that would encompass self-care. And self-care is not about being selfish because you take an hour in the morning.
Actually, you picked that out of my mouth, because we have seen people who have been proponents of self-care being termed as selfish people. People who will choose not to go out with their friends but to sit down and read a book because for them they enjoy self-care. We need to normalize it.
Yes, we need to normalize, because again, if you ask yourself, how many hours can you spend reading a book that makes you feel nice? Not more than 2 hours. How many hours can you spend in a gym that makes you feel rejuvenated, happy, feel good hormone? At most 1.5 hours. But because, and that is what we call when you understand yourself. When you understand yourself as an individual and say, what gives me sanity? Is physical activity. What gives me sanity is going to Karura and doing a walk. If you go to Karura this Saturday, you'll find families walking even with kids and their dogs. If you understand what gives you sanity, what, you know, your job in the morning, you're not going to take it anything else can wait. If it's in the morning, you can wake up an hour earlier to be able to do your physical activity and be there for your children, because I always say as women we have so much responsibility that we forget ourselves. So it's about identifying and knowing that if I don't do this self-care, I always say you cannot give what you don't have.
Oh, yes. I think you need to take it back. I think we need to come back there, because especially when talking about relationships, you know, you've moved this conversation from the interperson themselves now into intrapersonal.
Yeah.
They're dealing with other people. The issue of you can't give what you don't have. Yeah. So if you're expected to love someone else, you have to begin loving yourself first.
Yes.
That needs to come out. And it's not selfish, because I think we all are talking about this person is selfish because they're X, Y, Z.
Yeah. Because we want to receive what we don't have. Because if you don't love yourself, you expect me to love you. You have to love yourself first, so that even if I don't love you, you can carry on with your love. If I am not there for you, if I'm not able to meet up and have a girl's coffee, you don't feel, because I'm telling you I need to join the gym, or this Saturday we are going for hiking, you don't feel bad because you're left out. Because for me, that is what works. And it's not about going to the gym, it's not about, it's the little things.
Codependency issues.
Yes, it's about the little things. Can you identify what gives you sanity? What
as an individual.
When you have a stressful situation, a hard day at work, what is it that you can do, what we call bring back the balance? We talk about the balance. You know, getting back to your balance without going to a club and drinking just to feel that you have a balance. Yes.
So we've talked about cognition, and that is thoughts, then the emotion. We were talking about behavior.
Yes.
Behavior. What would be the, you know, direct, like you can see this person is actually going through something, as you've said, and relating to this story of this mother who beheaded her son, the third born for that matter, because he did not want to breastfeed and such. Now, issues of behavior, how do we identify? Because if you're saying 4 out of every 10 is dealing with mental illness, I'm looking at the family setup or even the work setup. How do we identify the outward so that we can, you know, maybe have a conversation with these people and ask them to seek help? What should we look out for?
I'll start by saying that fast behavior is very deceiving. By the time we're able, it is there, but sometimes we, as I said, as human being, I'm always going to hide my behavior.
Okay.
And by the time I'm not able to hide it, things are bad. And some of the behavior is, number one is social withdrawal. Someone who, and with behavior, it has to be someone who understands you. If it's an adolescent, that's a parent or the peers who are going to realize, of late, she's not joining. What is it that you do together? Because what about the friends? There is an assessment that we do that is called Heads, and we look at the exercise or the activities you do around the friends. Is it men who are watching football? Is it, you know, the women? What is it that with this friend of yours you do, or you know they love? If you call me on this, I'm not going to miss. But all of a sudden, I'm not there. I've been withdrawn. So that is one of the behavior. The next one is taking care of yourself, where you're no longer grooming yourself in terms of maybe shaving your hair, in terms of changing, because especially with depression, you lose track, you lose touch with the world. So why should I wake up? Showering is not a priority. So you wake up and bam in the couch and maybe watch TV and you ask me what is happening, I have no idea, because you're in a gaze. So it's issues of self-grooming, so you no longer change. You see this person with the same t-shirt, the same pants, I mean, Monday to Friday. The other one is now the extreme when you talk about issues like suicide or self-harm, where there, and this is to the teachers, where you find the children are and adolescents are self-harm, are cutting themselves up. But what are we interpreting it? We are looking at it as a cult. Some of them have cases where they have been chased from school. They've been expelled from school. What are you doing to that adolescent? They were crying with self-harm. It's more of a cry of help. But instead of giving them help, you've pushed them away. So mostly now we see the worst behavior where we have no point of return, which is suicide. And when talk about maybe suicide, sometimes you have suicide attempts. But what do we do to them? When utajua, you know, we brush them off and we relate with them. We have a lot of stigma and discrimination for people who have attempted suicide. But what the study is showing, when in every successful case of suicide, they have attempted about 3 to 4 times. What if we were able to save them at that first or second time?
Good question. I think it has taken me back because a while back, there was a similar situation, the issue that you cannot speak. What happens at that point? I would want to understand from, you know, a psychologist's point of at that point, what happens when you can't speak, when you can't reach out, when reaching out somewhat feels as if you're weak, you're exposing yourself, your vulnerabilities and such. Talking about coping mechanisms, sharing is a very integral part to get to this point. What happens when I can't talk?
I think, and that is why we're saying we have to have a very collective responsibility, because most of the time, even those ones who are going through it, as friends, you're able. I always feel crushed when someone commits suicide and the neighbors are there. Hata walikuwa wanagombana, walikuwa wanapigana, alikuwa amesema, you know, people come and give testimonies and there's nothing that can be done at that point. So even when you talk about when you cannot talk. There's someone, your friend is seeing it, but why it's, you know, we always talk about keeping lanes. You don't want to ask what's happening. But can we be a brother's keeper? Can we be able to reach out and ask, hey, of late, I'm seeing you, you're not even going with that. Is there something you want us to share? And if you're not feeling comfortable to talk to me as your friend, kindly seek help. I know, and that is now what we're doing as Nairobi Metropolitan Services, to make mental health services and structures stronger for accessibility. You don't have to go to Mbagathi or Mama Lucy. We have made in every sub-county, there's a mental health practitioner to reach out. Lastly, you talked about coping.
Coping mechanisms are very key. Yes, when you talk about depression and you're talking about coping, most people find solace at the bottom of a bottle. And we all know this leads to addiction and many other things in between. So what are the positive coping mechanisms that one can apply if they find themselves in this situation?
I think is what I started off with self-care. With self-care, it covers most of the coping mechanism.